The next 5 years in the UK will see the highs and lows, in whatever proportion they arrive, of the Keir Starmer government. That much we know. The question is, what will the opposition look like? For that, we only have clues right now based on the shape of the Conservative Party leadership election, the penultimate stage for which we saw the result of yesterday. To briefly summarise, we had 4 candidates during the party's recent conference: James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat, Kemi Badenoch and Robert Jenrick. Jenrick had become the front runner at that point, but during the conference was seen to have committed a couple of gaffes, while Cleverly was rated to have made the best speeches, so gained momentum. The Conservative MPs then got 2 more votes, one the result of which was announced the day before yesterday, brought the number down to 3. That saw the exit of the candidate considered the most centrist amongst the pack, Tom Tugendhat. Tugendhat was always likely to be the next one out at that point, but his conference contributions had been rated as relatively weak as well, so it rather became something of a certainty. And then another vote the very next day, yesterday. The expectation was that we would end up with James Cleverly, the relative centrist who had been ahead in the previous vote, versus one of the 2 candidates from the right, giving the membership a clear policy and ideology choice. Very much the same sort of dynamic we've seen in past contests, and in recent years those contests have usually gone pretty much without hesitation with the candidate which was the furthest to the right. But that's not what happened. Yesterday we got the result that the former frontrunner James Cleverly had fallen short, with Kemi Badenoch in the lead by a single vote and Robert Jenrick just behind her. Did something go horribly wrong on the day for James Cleverly? The Conservative MPs have prided themselves for many years as being the so-called most sophisticated electorate in the world. Kind of a reference to their Machiavellian calculations, where a front-running candidate might lend votes to a rival to knock out another candidate who is more strongly favoured with the wider party membership, before they get the chance to vote on it and hence make it easier for them to win. If supporters of James Cleverly were playing that game, they clearly miscalculated, taking votes away from their man that he could not in the event afford to lose. So, not so sophisticated after all, you might suggest. Now, there is no political spectrum in the offer to the membership, really just a choice between personalities and styles. Some might say this is regrettable. As the Cleverly campaign was quick to point out, polling had suggested that he was the leader whose current standing with the wider electorate, whose support you need to get if you're going to win back into government, was stronger. Usually you'd think that anyone strongly associated with the government that had failed, the one on the way out, whose abysmal track record had led the electorate to eject the Tories to the worst defeat of their history, for that would not be an asset on your political CV. Except the Boris Johnson and Liz Truss governments were defined rather significantly by the people at the head of the leadership. If they enraged the nation, if their policies fell apart under pressure, those events were very much owned by those principles. Johnson's lying and incompetence, latterly his one rule for the others, another for me attitude on Partygate, Liz Truss's plain weirdness and apparent disconnection from economic reality and general lack of social skills. But while they were drawing fire for their shortcomings, James Cleverly was pretty well regarded in his various senior jobs, was seen as thoughtful and competent. And right now, it's a deficit in competence, not the wrong ideology, that more than anything is how the Conservatives got to where they are. And for a while, it seemed there was a moment when that argument would hold sway. The equation people are making for this election has rather been affected by the fact that the shine has come off Keir Starmer's new government extremely quickly. When the Tories suffered a savage defeat to Tony Blair in 1997, they were out for a long time. So they could indulge the luxury of going through several hopeless leaders one after the other who had the ideological appeal to the base before getting back to winning form by choosing a leader who was actually electable. But now, all of a sudden, the Tories are daring to hope that if they could actually choose a competent leader, someone you could look at and imagine them actually being Prime Minister, well, maybe they could be back at the very next election. Recent Tory problems have often been associated with the sheer weirdness of some of their leading characters. Liz Truss, for instance, who was feted at the Tory party conference as though she was a thinker of some weight, rather than someone who took the reins of office and then metaphorically jumped out the window shouting "Yahoo!" all the way down. Cleverly's advantage had been that he seemed relatively normal, well, as much as a politician ever can be, but it wasn't enough, or maybe it was, but his supporters played stupid games and won stupid prizes. The supporters of the two remaining candidates would reject all of that, of course. Activists tend to believe that conformity with their ideology and competence are strongly overlapping features. And in the case of these candidates, they may be right. Both of them made strong speeches at the Tory party conference, although both of them also made gaffes of one sort or another, but then I suppose every politician has made mistakes, especially early on in their careers. So maybe, whichever one gets elected, maybe they will shine as the leader in opposition. Maybe they will be able to build a vision for the Conservative Party that will appeal to traditional Tory voters and the centre ground and win them back from the clutches of reform and indeed from those of the Labour Party. So the question is this: what is that vision? More specifically, what is the vision for this particularly difficult point in British political history? You know, where we as a country are now spending more on servicing the national debt than we do on defence and education combined, where we have a monster-sized NHS budget and bureaucracy, but delivering declining measures of performance. If the Conservatives believe, as we would expect them to, that Labour's approach of trying to find new pots of money to throw at these problems is not going to work, it's rather incumbent upon them to, over the next couple of years, not necessarily on day one, to paint that picture. To be fair, either of these candidates would possibly be able to do that. They show the signs of having the skills. They largely got to prominence by going after feature issues that please the base. Badenoch on being the anti-woke warrior that the left can't make a dent in because she's a black woman, and Jenrick trying to relive the glory days of Brexit by promising to leave the European Court of Human Rights, bearing in mind he voted to remain in the original Brexit vote. But in any case, neither of those are going to be bread and butter issues with the broader electorate, certainly not by 2029, so they will have to make a transformation. To do so, they will first and foremost have to train the Conservative Party out of their recent habit of plotting to replace the leader pretty much as soon as they've elected them. And maybe that will be possible, since the parliamentary party is now so much smaller than it used to be. Discipline is easier to maintain in a tighter group. And at least in opposition, you don't have the harsh day-to-day judgment of making mistakes that can literally ruin people's lives. So that takes some of the pressure off. By the way, a quick reminder, I am not a partisan. This is not a campaigning channel. I just try to understand what are the choices that the country gets asked to choose between and what they then go on to do afterwards. But it's precisely because Labour has had a ropey start and Starmer seems to have, right now, so little clue as how to reset and restart his government that this exercise by the Conservative Party does indeed seem like it might be rather consequential. not least because the skill of the Leader of the Opposition in dismantling the Prime Minister in Parliament may have a big part to play in just how long the government does indeed get to stick around. The final ballot is now taking place, where Conservative Party members across the country will be voting for their favoured candidates. The result will be announced to the world on November the 2nd. In the meantime, you can cast a significant vote of your own by giving this channel a thumbs up and hitting the subscribe button. Yes, it's a less consequential decision than voting for the leader of a political party, but one with much reduced chances of unintended consequences, if that's any consolation.